and welcome to On Air with B&B.
I'm Brittany.
And I'm Bethany, and we are two mental health therapists with real talk and mental health tips that matter. Today, we are going to be talking about when your child is being left out.
Yeah.
I think this is a very normal part of childhood and adulthood, but definitely I sometimes think as adults, we handle it a little bit better. We understand it a little bit better. We're going to be talking about in this video different age groups, because we've got clients and kiddos that are little that get left out. There are clients in middle school and high school, young adults.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to touch on all of those different age groups and maybe some specific diagnoses. For example, ADHD is a big one due to some of the behaviors that come, impulsive behaviors or social skills that are, being jeopardized due to diagnoses, and kind of just giving a little bit of insight into those and how to help your kiddo if they are feeling left out. Because it's hard as a parent when kids are coming home and saying nobody ever invites me to anything, or nobody includes me, or maybe they were included and now are not getting included anymore
because they got replaced.
Especially, right? I think this happens a lot in the middle school years, as friendships are changing. Or even, I've seen a lot of kids say they're nice to me privately, but then when we're around everyone, all of a sudden they're not. That's been a big topic of discussion in therapy lately with my middle school kids. And we're trying to teach about setting boundaries, and a big boundary for that is if you're going to be my friend all the time, not just some of the time.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it is an important topic. I mean, you do see it show up across the board from elementary school, middle school, high school, and even our young adults in
right.
college. We could start with elementary. I have a 5-year-old female who has ADHD, and she is incredibly bright academically. It's just really hard for her to focus on informal conversations when it comes to with friends and things of that nature. Now,
there's probably a lot of interruption.
Yes. And so she does interrupt a lot, whether that be, in casual conversations at the playground, or if she's got a play date. Mom has reported that to me as well. Okay. She does have a sister as well who has friends who comes over, and, she will try to interrupt or try to intervene, or
with her sister's friends.
Correct.
Gotcha.
At the house even more so. And so, it does show up academically as well, but she does have a 504 accommodations plan. And so she has a lot of support tools in place to allow her to be successful in the
academically, but not so much socially.
Right. So you see how this can be a discrepancy, right? And so she and I, we've been working together weekly, in sessions for about a year or so. So there's been so much progress. What I'm talking about is how she was at baseline when she first came to me for therapy, right? And then before, all of the work, this is what was presenting, right? And so, yes, so constantly interrupting. And so it was really hard because she did feel left out. And then she was seeing her sister kind of having friends over and having relationships that she desired, and she couldn't understand well, why is this happening? And then of course that kind of triggered and transcribed into other things like depression symptoms and things of that nature, and
self-esteem issues.
Correct. A lot of confidence kind of went out the door, unfortunately, at that point,
even at age 5.
Right. And so
which I feel is the age that kids are generally most confident,
right. No, absolutely. And so we did see that kind of switch in the very, very beginning stages of therapy. I'm talking about within the 2 weeks. And that's when we just were nope, this is what we're going to prioritize. And we've seen a lot of success. So what I promote and encourage to the parents to focus on is just kind of like ignoring. We would do like a nonverbal kind of gesture. And so it would either be like this or this to practice at home. And so I would encourage mom and dad at home to talk to each other. When grandma would come over as well, mom would talk to grandma, and my little friend over here would just have to like wait her turn. We did go over also, I will preface with emergencies, of
Mm-hmm.
course, like what is an emergency that is okay to interrupt, right? Because there are certain exceptions, and I think that's important to talk about as well. So, if you're severely hurt, like a serious injury where there's blood or dislocation or something like that, I think that's important to note. But those are just kind of expectations that you would have to set as the parents, and define with your child what are emergencies that allow you to appropriately interrupt a conversation. Outside of that, we wouldn't do it. A second option, or a second suggestion, really, that I always promote is well, we have a couple of these. And so I actually have the black version of the microphone. And my favorite game to play is who has the microphone. I mean, there was one week where I was walking around with the microphone because I really enjoyed it myself. But it's basically whoever has the microphone has the opportunity to talk. Right. And so when I'm done talking, then I can give the microphone, to the client in front of me, and then he or she has the opportunity to converse as well. So we're learning how to like wait our turn, and this does circle back to our theme of when my child is being left out, because it's,
Well,
a child with ADHD would interrupt in conversations, and then it's
and
like,
then that is possibly a reason why they're being left out,
correct,
because
they're not
some
being
of
fun to
their
be around.
friends are not. Yeah, and we say, are you being respectful, responsible, and fun to be around? And
Mm-hmm.
this is an example of not fun to be around. If you're always interrupting, if you're not waiting your turn.
Changing the topic, she would do
Yeah,
that often
I
as
was just
well.
thinking when you were talking about suggestions for the little guys, on how to like teach your kiddo to, you know, um, among these like social skills, I was thinking like playing, if you have like Barbies, or for boys, like the little like figurines, or they can play with Barbies too, who
Yeah.
cares really. But doing more like, hey, you want to play, and then you're role playing, but you also have like a tangible figure as well, instead of just sitting here and role playing like we
Mm-hmm.
do with some of our older kiddos.
Right.
So turning it
Play
into
therapy,
play
essentially. Mm-hmm.
therapy, but like role playing, like, and maybe having like, more than one Barbie, or obviously I meant more than two, like, so that, okay, there's two friends over here and they're having a conversation, and then this is you, and then, and you can even name them, like the names of their friends in their class, or like in their play group or their team or
Yeah.
whatever it is, and just actually like do that as a role play scenario for the younger ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if my 11-year-olds would really love that as much, but the 5-year-olds
Yeah. I'm
would.
also thinking of like another client too, because that's a client, an elementary student, um, and she has ADHD. Now I'm thinking of a different elementary student, and he has ODD. And he consistently, unfortunately, gets left out because of his, defiant like behavior in the academic setting. Um, a lot of his peers, unfortunately, are like, oh, you know, he's not making the right
They could view him as
choices.
like
And
the bad kid,
yeah, which is really
like, and
disheartening.
he's not. I know
Right.
exactly who you're talking about. He's the sweetest.
He's so sweet.
But if
Yeah.
he's getting angry because he's frustrated at school, and then, like throwing something or walking out of the classroom, or I don't know exactly what his behaviors are, but
Mm-hmm.
these are just behaviors that have been reported for kids with ODD in the classroom a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Then other kids are like, well, we should stay away from him, and sometimes their parents are telling them that, like when they're saying, oh, listen to what so and so did at school today.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
um
really disheartening. And even shows up like this particular child, he also plays a sport. And so even on, the field, it's, another reason that he gets left out from his team members, like activities, right? Because a lot of his team members don't go to his school. It's a private league. Um, it's really hard to say this, but he tries to like show off. He feels like showing off and, having control of the ball and making all the shoots and scores. that that's going to get him to be like likable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than working like what? A team member. All right. And so, and that is a part of, and it's consistent with the ODD diagnosis, and that is a marker. So it's imperative that you guys do know. And that's why we are big like advocates, I think, of assessments and evaluations. Even though at our practice we do treat symptoms, diagnoses can give us a really big picture of what we're working with. Because here's the thing, the same symptom can be present in multiple differential diagnoses. And so that's really important to just be aware of and mindful of as well as a parent. But circling back to my friend here and on the field, he does get left out from even his team hangouts, or one of his team members has a birthday party and he won't get invited, or one of the other team members is having a sleepover, or they travel and he's the only one who didn't get invited to the dinner,
Yeah,
right?
and I think too, speaking of being like the only one, when we were kids, I feel like it was harder to know if you were the only one that didn't get invited. But now with phones, like
You're
I'm
right.
like they're posting these things on Snapchat and things like that.
Instagram.
And so then you automatically know, oh, wait, they all went to the mall today and I wasn't even invited.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's just another thing to be aware of. Like they really know when they're being left out now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also, even with, because we're still talking about elementary school, because I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more about, an ASD elementary student, maybe level 1, 2, and 3. We can talk really quickly about what that looks like, because there's different levels. ASD is autism spectrum disorder, and there's 3 different levels. They've done away with the differential diagnosis of Asperger's. And so level 1 is typically known as the highest level functioning. It's relatively consistent with the old differential diagnosis of
Mm-hmm.
Asperger's. Then there's level 2, which is moderate, and then level 3, which is a little bit lower functioning, more behaviors, typically less to nonverbal, if you will, for the level 3 and things of that nature. And then level 2 is somewhere in the middle. Again, it's really hard to like say, it's such a huge spectrum really, and what this looks like for an ASD presenting client, even more so for elementary students. But for even a high functioning level 1, typically this is inclusive of just really focusing on something that they really enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in elementary school, I've had girls and boys alike that are level 1 ASD, and they are obsessed with either the Barbie dolls, or dinosaurs, cars, all of these things, and they know all of these facts, right? And that's so cool. And so maybe it's really cool for them, and they are able to initiate a friendship and initiate a conversation, right? But then it's like
All
that's
they want to
all they
talk
want to talk
about.
about,
And
right?
so then their friend, we have to teach them how, again, it's like taking turns but with topics,
Mm-hmm.
so not just taking turns with toys but topics.
Yes, absolutely. And learning how to like navigate different conversations. And, it could be hard for an elementary student, regardless, kindergarten or 5th grade, to say, hey, I don't want to really just talk about dinosaurs
For an
anymore.
hour.
Right. Again, or talk about this one particular movie or whatever
With a lot
their
of my
thing is. Yeah.
kiddos, when we're practicing conversation, we call them conversation starters. We teach them because in elementary school, I believe, is when they're learning about WH, what, where, when, all
Who,
of those
yeah.
things. So then we teach them to integrate those into the conversation starters to learn to be more interested in what your friend wants to talk about as well.
Right. Absolutely. And so I think that is really, really important just to make note of, because, when your child is being left out, it's not because, they are
Or
unkind
unlikable.
or unpleasant or rude or even disrespectful. Sometimes that's not the case. And so we wanted to take the time in this video today to highlight different specific examples that are consistent with different diagnoses as well, and different age groups. Go us. Right. And so for circling back to ASD, we did highlight like level 1, what that can like look like. And, some strategies, like Bethany was saying, is just teaching conversation starters, maybe even role playing at home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like with siblings who are more understanding, but we don't want to always put that on the other child either, right? So I always say, like in sessions, parents should always like role play that
And
and
I
model that.
often tell my parents to practice in the car. I think it's a great place with like the way that our lives are these days. I feel like everyone's so busy going from one thing to the next, but like that's the one time that like we're kind of forced to be together. And I mean, you have anywhere from, 10 minutes to 30 minutes, I think, like when you're
Mhm.
going from school to home or to, a
The
sport
grocery
or
store.
wherever.
Yeah.
And we can say, you know what, we're going to use this time to practice our conversation starters or to practice, we start with the WH questions to start the conversations, but now we're going to add comments. We're going to learn about how to like add comments. So when your friend says, that this weekend they went fishing, you can comment and say, well, that sounds really fun, or that sounds cool, or I like fishing, to show interest and that you're listening. And I feel like the car is such a good place
Mm-hmm.
because you really can't go anywhere else. They can't go to their room, they can't go outside, they can't go, and
Yeah.
it's a great opportunity to take 20, 10 to 30 minutes to practice these
Yeah.
role playing scenarios.
Absolutely. I even, I do suggest also just opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So playgrounds, going to the playground, giving them the opportunity to
To
practice
practice.
with other peers, right? It's great that we're practicing with parents because parents are having the opportunity to guide and to lead and to teach, right? But when we give them the opportunity, whether that be at a playground or we're here in Florida, so if you go to like the beach, or if you initiate play groups or whatever that may look like, or going to like extracurricular activities, you're giving the child or the children the opportunity to practice in real life situations the skills that are meant to be applied, and you can be there as the parent to encourage, to promote, to praise and things of that nature. And so I think that would be really important.
If there are any social skills groups in your area, I would highly recommend getting your kiddos into them, or even if you can find one online
Mhm.
that they can do virtually, again, for the practice with other children.
Yeah.
Because as adults, when we're practicing, it's very structured, I think, and we know how to respond. But kids are unpredictable,
Yeah.
and so it's real life practice,
Yeah.
even if it is in a safer, more structured environment, because it's a social skills group.
Right.
Like you really
Absolutely.
never know what's going to come out of a kid's mouth.
Right. And then it is interesting. And so even for like the ASD level 2 and level 3, it's important to like consider, where they're at cognitively and developmentally as well. And so especially for level 3 ASD children, it is really hard to make friends and to keep friends, because sometimes there can just be, a lot of impulsive behaviors that could be not just uncomfortable, but could also be potentially unsafe in certain situations and
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. And so it is important to like understand too, to for you as parents who are tuning in, to like find your people, right? Especially if you do have a level 3 ASD child who may not be verbal and things of that nature. That doesn't mean that they can't have friends. We can communicate without utilizing words. It's really impressive and really interesting. And so I think it's just important for one, acceptance, and then two, just understanding, and three, just really finding your people of, you know, who have other kiddos who may be on the spectrum in level 3 and nonverbal as well, and they can just engage in reciprocal play rather than parallel play. I'm sorry, parallel play rather than reciprocal play. Parallel play is essentially just when two individuals are sitting next to each other and engaging in their own
It's what
independent
I like to do with my
activities.
husband.
Yeah. And then reciprocal play is when they're actually engaging and interacting with their child, the other child as well. And so you may not see reciprocal play. You would with a level 3 ASD child, you will see it with level 1, potentially level 2 as well. Again, huge spectrum, so it does vary. I can't reiterate that enough. But for the level 2 and level 3 ASD, because of their cognitive functioning and potential increase of maladaptive behaviors, those are kind of like the steps that I always
Mm-hmm.
encourage my parents to really find their people as well, and to really pour into their children. And their relationships are going to look very different from most people's
I,
expectations.
I also want to just touch on this really quickly because I had a parent group last night for, we have a teen social skills group. I mean, we have every age, but we did our teen one last night. And something that is always a big, excuse me, a big topic of discussion is following your child's lead. So if your child is happy with one friend, or, just a couple friends, or only seeing that one friend, maybe once a month, or doing something socially occasionally, if they're truly happy with that, then I always encourage parents, like, then you try to be happy with that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's only if they're coming home and saying, like,
I want
I
more
want more
friends.
friends. I wish I had more friends. I want to hang out with people, but I don't have anyone to hang out with. But
Mm-hmm.
if your child is truly happy socially and they don't feel like they're being left out, don't push the issue either because it's something that we think that they should have.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that comes up in our groups all the time, because a lot of, like, and last night during our group, the parents were talking about how their kids, it's very common for a kid with ASD to have a very short social battery, so to speak. So, like, they'll hang out with a friend and it's a really good time, but then they need like 3 days to recuperate, from all the socialization. And so, if we're forcing them, to socialize more than their social battery allows, then that becomes a negative interaction. So we kind of want to follow their lead on that a little bit too,
Yeah.
because ASD, depending, and every like Brittany's saying, like, every kid, depending where they're at on the spectrum, even if they're in the same level, might have, one child might have a bigger social battery than another. So really, like, respecting that, checking in and finding out, that was really fun. You seem really tired. You let me know when you're ready to do something else again. And we can, like, work on setting that up, or going to our group, or going to your activity.
Right. I
Um,
would even say too that that could be really just implemented across the board, regardless of age of your child or
yeah.
children,
Or,
your
yeah, whether they have ASD or not,
diagnosis, or yeah,
it's just very common.
in
And
the
we're
ASD
always talking
population.
about
Yeah.
how they get drained really quickly after a big social
Yeah,
experience.
no, absolutely. And so I do think that that's important for parents to recognize, like, is this something that my child wants, or is this something I want for my child?
Mm-hmm.
And just having that hard conversation with yourself. I've had to have that a lot, like very often with some of my parents
Yeah,
as
that just
well.
because this is what maybe you had wanted as a child, maybe your child doesn't necessarily want it, or it doesn't look the same as the way
Mhm.
you wanted it.
Right, absolutely. So I know we talked about a lot of elementary students. We transitioned to middle school. It seems like I'm kind of looking at like the middle school, even transitioning into high school age groups when it comes to ASD, because it does look very different.
Mm-hmm.
But when making friends, keeping friends, when your child is being like left out as well, um, I do want to preface, like, when your child is being left out is our topic, but it's not just out left out of like parties or friendships and things of that nature. But as we're in middle school, entering high school, or in high school, they're kind of exploring romantic relationships as
Mm-hmm.
well. I've had a lot of preteens and teenage girls come up to me, regardless if they have anxiety, depression like symptoms, maybe they are neurodivergent, whether they are ASD and or ADHD. Um, so across the board, I see this relatively consistently. Like, I feel like, I'm not the popular girl, right? I don't feel, cool enough. I need to like do my makeup. I need to wear this. I need to vape to be cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, oh wait, I can't do that, Britt. And I'm like, okay, like, in my head, I'm like, good choice for not engaging in those activities, right? But then they find themselves being left out of the groups that they think they want to be in, right?
Yeah.
So we see that a lot as well. My biggest suggestion for that is really pouring into your child's self-esteem and confidence. a huge factor and component of that is your child is seeking validation in some capacity, and they're seeking validation from people that they look up to,
Yeah.
right? And so that's two things. We want them to feel validation within through reassurance independently, and that's just a lot of confidence. So whether that be like getting them a confidence journal, whether that's engaging in more self-care, whether that's also, encompassing, I don't know, just positive words of affirmation, right? Whether that's coming to see your own therapist and really walking through and working through and navigating all of these concerns simultaneously. I think that's really important. Um, and so just working through that, because, when your child is being left out, it does encompass like sometimes like not engaging in peer pressure like activities does cause your child, especially middle school age and high school age, to be left out of certain things. Maybe your kid is in high school and they're like, oh, there's like this cool, I don't know if kids even do this anymore. Back in my day, we used to do this, but like house parties.
They do.
They do? Okay, good to
Mm-hmm.
know. So there's house parties, and it's like, geez, like I didn't even get invited to the house party. Not that I can even go, Britt. My parents watch me like a hawk, but like I just feel left out because I didn't even get an invitation. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing. We also see a lot of like, you know, I feel like left out of my friend group because all of my girlfriends have a boyfriend, or I feel left out because like all of my guys are talking to a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hear that
Or what
narrative a
if
lot.
like I get a lot with my teenage clients of, well, like all they want to do is get together and drink, and I don't want to drink. Or like all of my friends are having sex
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not really ready for that yet. And so then they start to feel like they don't have anything to bring to the table, as far as like conversation pieces, when this is all their friend group is maybe talking about, because maybe they were all friends in elementary school or middle school, and now as they've entered later middle school and high school, their friends have, um, in their minds, or you know physically, like matured faster than they have, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're starting to feel left out because they don't want to have those things in common, but they still miss the friendship that they had once had.
Right.
I see that a lot.
Absolutely. And so, some strategies for all of these things, right, for the middle schoolers and high schoolers, again, to reiterate, building up confidence in the self esteem, engaging in those self care activities. One thing I didn't mention thus far is maybe looking at or helping your child, whether you're the parent or the therapist, like the clinician, reframing, like, is this maybe reframing, like, what is a friendship? What's a healthy
Mm-hmm.
friendship supposed to look like, right? And encouraging and helping and guiding your child or your client to recognize potentially maybe this is not a healthy relationship.
And giving them examples of maybe a time that this happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
or even times as adults our friendships change too, and maybe your kids have been around to see that, and you can give that example. When we give real life examples, for our kids, it helps them relate.
You're
um,
normalizing it
yeah,
too. And
definitely.
you're also fostering this level of openness and vulnerability so that your child can continue to come to you and have these uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
conversations. And I say uncomfortable because it is, right? How can I say like, oh mom, like I feel left out because all my friends in my group, they all have boyfriends and they're having sex, and I'm over here like just focus on school because I want to get into Yale,
Mm-hmm.
like, and so different priorities. And so just not dismissing your children either, but also encouraging them to look at like, okay, are these the friendships that we want to have? Because there's this saying of you are who you hang around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you can bring that into light. So I think that there's a few, those are a couple positive strategies to really implement for your middle school and high school boys and girls, that might be feeling left out for any of those reasons, right? Because it does look a lot different than elementary school, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then, is there anything else that you want to add for the middle school and high school?
Again, middle school is just the worst.
It's hard. Yeah.
It is, and like I was saying earlier, with the phones nowadays, and surprisingly, like I have elementary kids who have phones, but so it can apply as well. But yeah, I have one girl in particular that I was thinking of, and she's got she gets left out because she just got her phone. She doesn't have any
The phone is a big one.
guidance on how to like socially use a phone. So when her friends, they're all in a group text and they're all texting and they're all talking about something, she'll just come in and talk about something completely different. And then they, label her as like weird or being odd, or they just don't want to talk to her on the text about what she's talking about. Um, so that's one example that she doesn't know, like, conversation, I guess, etiquette on a text, like on a group text.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that you can definitely work on with your kiddos. Like, don't just give them the phone, but like now you're going to be texting. It's kind of like when we're having a conversation in person. We have to take turns, we have to stay on topic, all of these things, just kind of going over with that with them. Also, I call it like blowing up. Like I had to, when you call, if they don't answer, don't keep calling
Right.
until they answer.
That's a
That's
good one.
really obnoxious. And then
Mm-hmm.
that can cause people to block you or not want, again, to have like a rift or leave you out.
Yeah. I see
Um,
that a lot, just to bring in like differential diagnoses actually.
mhm.
I see that a lot in my like level 1 ASD, like middle school and
I
high
see it
school
a lot in
clients.
the ADHD
I was
kiddos
going to say
because they are so
ADHD.
impulsive.
And I also see it a lot in my anxiety
Yeah. Oh,
kiddos with
yes.
middle school and high school, because they're like, oh my gosh, now they
They've
hate
left me
me.
on red. That's
They
what they
hate
call
me.
it.
Or wait, did I make a mistake? And now they're overthinking, because
Mm-hmm.
perfection like tendencies, right? Or then they're like, oh my goodness, like, did I make them upset? They go to
Mm-hmm.
worst case scenario, and and so it triggers their anxiety. And so like, but no, I'm in case you were just, and then they send this other like long text message paragraph. Meanwhile, the other person is just, studying, and they
Or
just,
at soccer practice.
right. And they're just,
Or like me, where I leave my phone everywhere and it's on silent, because it was on silent, especially nowadays. Kids aren't, at least in Florida, kids aren't allowed to have their phones at school. So a lot of kids still bring them, but then they just put it on silent and then they get home and they forget to take it off of silent,
yes,
So just kind of like pointing that out too to them, like, what were you doing an hour ago? Oh, well, I was at, gymnastics. Okay. And did you have your phone when you were at gymnastics? Well, no. Well, maybe they were doing something and they didn't have their phone, or maybe,
mm-hmm.
oh, they just don't even consider that. They go to worst case scenario, especially the kiddos with anxiety
Mm-hmm.
or little overthinkers.
Yes, absolutely. So I do see a lot of those in those differential diagnoses as far as middle school and high school, when it comes to them feeling like they're being left out in their friend
Also,
groups.
with being left out, really talking to your kids about social media and like how much time on social media is healthy. And I'm not talking about just like TikTok and things like that, watching reels, but like actually like checking like Snapchat and Instagram and things like that. Because again, if you're not on those apps all day, you're also not going to know if what everybody in your grade is doing all the time anyways. So
Right.
just like keeping it to a minimum, so that maybe like I always say, like, I'm not on social media and I love it and I call it like living in my bubble, because I really don't know what other people are doing unless I want to know.
Yeah.
And I really talk to my teenage kids about that a lot, because it's nice.
It
Like,
is
because
freeing.
then that saying, ignorance is bliss. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so I'm not bothered by it. I
Yeah.
don't know that I'm being left out.
Yes. I know. I don't have social media either. It's really freeing. And so it is important to like encourage your children to like look at things and reframe it in a different light or different perspective. And sometimes, like when your child is being left out, sometimes that just insinuates like change does have to happen in some capacity, whether that be, working on skills independently to like learn how to focus or stay on topic or not interrupt, or looking at, is this a healthy friendship? Is this a relationship that I want to engage in?
I also like to give the analogy to a lot of kids that are feeling like, that just feeling left out. Like, just because your friend is hanging out with somebody else today doesn't mean that they don't like you, because
Right.
that's one that I get a lot too.
Yeah.
And I always like give them the analogy of food. This is harder with ASD clients and it's harder because a lot of my ASD clients only like two kinds of foods. But so then I don't use food, I use something else as like an analogy. But food is a big one for me because I'll say, well, what's your favorite food? And they'll say, I don't know, like Mexican. And I'll say, okay, but sometimes are you in the mood for Italian, or are you in the mood for Japanese or Chinese, or
Yeah.
French fries and hamburgers? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, does that mean you don't like Mexican anymore? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's how friends are too. Just because you want to hang out with Sarah today instead of Michelle doesn't mean that you don't like Michelle anymore. It just means that you're in the mood for Sarah.
Yeah.
And then that a light bulb goes off for them. So I think like comparing it to the fact that we, even our ASD kiddos who like very specific things, they still like sometimes a variety of specific things.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping it to that, you still like those other things. You're just in the mood for maybe the red Legos today instead of the blue Legos,
Yeah.
or whatever it may be.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good analogy. And so it does show up, across the board. I do want to talk a little bit about young adults. I have a couple young adults on my caseload who do struggle with friendships and do struggle with just being left out. I even hear it from their parents. I have one young adult, and she is like 20. And so she struggles with having friends, engaging in friends, and she often feels very left out. She is ASD level 2. And so she does shut down sometimes in conversations and doesn't, initiate conversations often, nor does she stay on topic a lot of the times. And if it's something she doesn't want to talk about, she will just like walk away. And so it does impact her friendships. And so it is really important to recognize too that cognitively, even though she is 20, biologically, like, cognitively, she is more along the lines of 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something to keep in mind as well for maybe some of the parents who are tuning in today and have young adults or older adults who may have, ASD or some type of neurodivergent or cognitive disorder or disability, and maybe presenting characteristically at a younger age, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if that is the case for you, all of our previous suggestions for the like cognitive developmental like age group that they meet those markers and characteristics again of, that would be our best bet, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And then I do have another young adult. She's a level 1 ASD, and she is a transgender female. And so she is 22 now. And she is very, very high functioning. And she can do really well in social situations. But kind of circling back to what Bethany was saying, her social battery gets depleted very, very quickly. And so I say this to say it doesn't just limit to certain age groups. You do see this across the board, right? And so even though she is 22, it's really hard for her because their social battery gets drained really quickly. And then on top of that, the added layer is that she is a transgender female. And so for any of our parents or viewers today who, are trying to navigate their identity or sexuality, or are in transition or have transition, being mindful that not everyone is accepting of that, unfortunately. And so even though it is 2026, we do have to be mindful of that as well. And so those are things that could lead to your child, whether it's a minor child or your adult child, to being left out in different types of social situations as well. And again, you just have to find your people, right? For like this particular client that I'm thinking of, there is a LBGTQ plus community nearby. There's like a group organization, if you will, and it really kind of allows like-minded individuals to find their people, right? And so once I provided that information for her, it did take her a while to go, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when she did go, she was able to connect with very like-minded individuals and navigate some friendships there. And so sometimes we do have to kind of again think outside the box and just, I know I said it earlier, but finding your people, finding people who accept you for who you are. And so I think that's really important too, but also teaching, all individuals that it's not about how many friends you have, it's about the quality of
Yeah,
friends.
quality versus quantity, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like what we've talked about in other videos with our green light, yellow light, and red light friends.
Yeah.
Reminding our kids and young adults that realistically, like, most people don't have a huge handful of green light friends. They think they do,
Right.
but realistically, no. Like, those are your like ride or die. Like, I can trust them with anything. They've got my back in every situation possible. We have more yellow friends than anything. And then there's the red light
That we just
that we
don't,
just stay away
should not,
from.
yeah,
Right.
should not associate with. But yeah, no, this was fun. So thank you so much for hanging out with us on Air with B. Remember, your mental health matters, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
I'm looking for somebody I can call.